Welcome to episode 17 of Inside Politics, for teens, by teens, where I explore the politics and issues impacting our generation. I'm your host, Christina Li, and today I'm focusing on LGBTQ rights and activism. For this, I've invited Earl Fowlkes, the chairman of the LGBT Caucus of the Democratic National Committee. He's also the founder and president of the Center for Black Equity. Mr. Fowlkes, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so I guess to start, for those watching who aren't very familiar with how the DNC works, can you just explain your role and I guess like how the DNC works and how your role plays into that?
Well, I don't think many of us who are involved in the DNC understands how it works, but I can give you my best theories. The DNC is the governing body of the Democratic National Party. It's sort of the board of directors for the Democratic National Party and all the 57 states and territories who have state parties. And what happens is that each state and territory gets to elect two people to be on the DNC, a national committee woman and a national committee man. And so that's part of it. Then there's some elected officials, and then there's some organizations such as the Young Democrats, High School Democrats of America, the College Democrats of America. There's a few other organizations, and the chair gets to pick 75 members to be in the DNC. Now, if you include the 75, I'm an appointed member of the DNC. That's to give diversity and to round out the numbers and make sure everyone's included. And there are 465 members of the DNC, and we're the governing body. Now, within that governing body, we have the executive board, and that's made of, I believe, 50-something odd members, and I'm on the executive board because I'm a caucus chair. And so we basically, the DNC's job is to run the nomination process and I guess what we would call I'm drawing a blank. We just had primary process, the primaries, yes, how can I forget the primaries? And the primaries, the problem with that is that the primaries are actually, how the primaries are enacted are basically done by the states for most of the primaries. So the DNC's role is really to ensure that there's a fair ground and level ground for everyone who participates as a member who's trying to be nominated for the presidency. And last time, on the last primary season, we had over 24 candidates. And that's because the DNC really bent over backwards to ensure that every candidate who wanted to run, everyone who thought they should be president of the United States, had an opportunity to run. And the DNC, that's the major job of the DNC, is to ensure that we have a nominee to run against whoever the Republicans put up to run. And we did that. We had a virtual convention. The other job is we work with the Democratic National Convention Committee to do the convention. This year was a virtual convention because of COVID-19. And I had my reservations at the outset, but I thought it was very well run and very well executed. And we had two-hour LGBT caucus meetings, and we had over 10,000 people tune in. So it was really an excellent event. And more people were able to participate and understand how primaries and the convention operates because it was virtually done this year.
Got it. So what does it mean to you personally to serve in such a prominent role in this organization?
Well, I didn't ask to be on the DNC. I'm political, but I was not politically inclined to be in the DNC. And so in 2009, I was approached by some other members of the DNC, some other members of our community who thought I would be a good choice. And they asked me I have to write a letter to the chair of the party, who was at the time Governor Tim Kaine of Virginia. He was the chair of the party in 2009. And I wrote a letter, and he, I guess, saw that my credentials and that I had a constituency that I represented needed to be at the table, and I was appointed by Tim Kaine. And I've been on the DNC since 2009. How do I feel about it? As I understand the mystery of the DNC and the mystery of these kind of national politics, and I've become much more astute in how to use my place at the table to push agenda items that are very important to the Black LGBTQ community and the LGBTQ community in general. It's about relationship building. It's like any other institution in the world. The DNC it's an institution, and it's been the oldest party. Has been around since 1848, and their traditions and their reasons why people do things, and no one knows why they do it that way because it's always been done that way. And I understand now, as each increasing year, how to get things done and how to quietly work within the machinery of the Democratic Party to be a strong voice for my communities that I represent. So I'm at first I didn't understand what was going on, but as I become more of a expert, I think I'm enjoying it, the process, and I feel that I'm able to represent my community correctly.
Understood. So I guess just switching to LGBT policy, it's well known that there was a landmark Supreme Court ruling in 2015 on legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. And I guess in general, how have I guess like policy and judicial rulings reflected the increased acceptance and inclusion of LGBTQ people over the years?
Well, I'll tell you something. Policy and laws do not change attitudes. They help create a fair, playing field for people to participate in the institutions of society, which are very important. But attitude changes take a long time. They take much longer. So if you think about the Civil Rights Act of 1965 and how earth-shattering that was, there's still a great deal of racism. There's still a great deal of there's still many barriers for people to vote and participate, and there's still discrimination. And that's been, many years ago. That's been 50 years ago, 55 years ago. And so we're still fighting that battle of being fair towards all communities of color and all immigrants and just people, human rights in general. But when the Supreme Court made the ruling, it legalized same-sex marriage, which is a very important step towards, recognition of equality among our community. But you still, because we don't have a law to protect people from being fired from their job or being kicked out of their homes, you can get married on a Saturday and lose your job on Monday if you're LGBTQ. So we still have, it's just one step of many steps we have to take towards full equality.
Got it. So I guess there's a lot of talk about saying like, it's 2020, why is this still happening with like issues like LGBTQ rights? And I guess like from a social acceptance and I guess like social behavior standpoint, what do you think of the progress we have made?
Well, we've made a tremendous amount of progress, obviously, since the start of the modern LGBTQ rights movement, which was Stonewall in the last weekend of June in 1969. We've made a great deal of progress. There's been a great deal of acceptance. We have many more LGBTQ elected officials. We have many LGBTQ people who are involved in policy and politics. And so, and if there is a change of administration, I can rest assured that there'll be increased movement on making LGBT rights the law of the land so that everyone has a fair chance to get ahead and to make themselves, to find their worth and their place in our society. So I would say that there's been a great deal of progress. The thing about progress is the more progress you get, the more you realize you have to do. And so there are many steps. And I think that, even same-sex marriage, if you look at the public opinion on same-sex marriage, when same-sex marriage came on, it barely had a majority of people who believed it should happen. Now the majority is much larger because people who are against same-sex marriage have come to realize that LGBTQ people have just as much to be miserable in the state of marriage as anyone else. And because an LGBT person gets married, if you're not in that community, it doesn't undermine your marriage or the institution of marriage, which is basically about protecting property, really. Mm-hmm. You don't have to get married to have a relationship.
Got it. And I know you said earlier that policy doesn't reflect, I guess, like society's attitude and behavior, but in the case where a policy does get passed or maybe a landmark ruling is ruled upon, what does that mean for the LGBTQ movement besides the actual policy itself? Like, does it mean the movement?
What I was meant to convey is that by passing a policy, it does not mean that society is going to change its personal attitudes. You can't legislate behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried, it's like in the 1919, the great, I forget what amendment was, but it established prohibition, the elimination of alcohol in America to stop people from drinking. And yet what happened is there were more people drinking during Prohibition than before Prohibition, because people wanted to drink. You can't make people stop drinking, and you can't make people be nice to other people,
Mm-hmm.
or to be kind to other people, or to not discriminate against people. What you can do is make a penalty for if you do things that are against the law, you can get penalized for it. And if people get penalized for it enough, it'll change their behavior. And the Civil Rights Act of 1965 should have eliminated discrimination in housing, and yet we still have discrimination in housing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to do. What I'm saying is policy is important, and policy is something that will help shape the future of our country and the fairness in our country. But by doing so in itself, does that mean even the Supreme Court Act, there's still people very resistant to same-sex marriage. There's still people who put barriers up for same-sex couples. And there's still discrimination towards same-sex couples. Their marriage is protected, but their rights to avoid discrimination in housing and employment and other parts are still up for grabs. And we have to work continually until we have these laws in place to protect everyone.
Got it. So I guess there's a lot of people place importance on like coalition building, right? Because I guess in the fight for LGBT rights, you also have to like if you have straight allies who are also fighting for LGBT rights, can you talk a little bit more about how, like, in what ways they can help despite not being LGBT themselves?
Well, coalition building is essential, because if you look at the population who are LGBT, it's probably someplace between 5 and 12% of the population. So that means that we're a very small minority. It's like African Americans are only 12% of the population. So you can't get things passed unless you have allies that are essential. Allies who are working in public policies, allies who are elected officials, allies who are appointed officials, and allies who are civil servants. We have to have, and nonprofit allies as well. You have to have people working who believe in your causes to support you, so you can get things enacted and passed, and policy changes made and laws changes. So no movement in this country has been able to do it only based on the people who believe in their movement, who are in that community. No matter what community you're in, you have to have allies to, whether you're a woman or you're a person of color or whatever, or you're Muslim or whatever. You have to have allies in our society to move forward agenda policy changes. It's essential. You can't do it without it. It's impossible.
Understood. And I guess just like, since this is a podcast for Gen Z, I'm just gonna bring it back a little to the gen, like specific to Generation Z.
Definitely.
And yeah, so there's a lot of talk about Gen Z being the gayest generation, and I guess maybe that's as a result of increased support for coming out, and also I guess like more societal acceptance, and also just like that also plays into less internalized homophobia, so more people realize that they are LGBT. So I guess like, what do you think about this, and is this a sign that we're going in the right direction?
Oh, seeing teenagers coming out and young people coming out, and not only coming out, but take positions of leadership and use social media to make their voices heard, just like you're doing. I think it's just wonderful, because young people today had things that people in my generation did not have. We didn't have social media. We didn't have any visible examples of LGBTQ people for me to say, I want to be like that person when I come out. Or I was fortunate enough to have a family to accept me, and my father's a minister, and he just retired recently, and who accept me and my lesbian sister. We were not forced to, even though we didn't talk about it in the household, but we weren't forced to date. We weren't forced to go to the prom. If someone in our family, in our extended family, asked about if we were gay or not, or if I had a girlfriend, more than if I had a girlfriend, my mother would answer before I could. She would say, it's none of your business. But my parents were enlightened, and I appreciate that about them. I'm a better person because they behaved that way. But that was a rare situation. Most of my friends were repressed. They were hiding their sexuality expression. And today, people don't have to do that. There's still a great deal of discrimination, and people still die for being LGBTQ. But I think that your generation is leading the way in how to better make the world more accepting to LGBTQ people. It's your generation more than my generation. You know, we did a lot of the hard work to make it easy for you, but you were picking up the mantle and moving forward and really stepping up to the plate to express yourselves and to make certain that people who are older respect you and respect who you are and who you want to be.
Yeah, no, it's amazing because I'm on social media a lot and I see all over Instagram and Snapchat just like stories about like on their Instagram stories like, oh, like here's a post about like LGBTQ rights and the history. It's just really great. And I guess like from another perspective is, let's say that you're closeted and or live in a homophobic environment and you still want to do LGBTQ activism, but you also don't want to out yourself. Do you have any advice for, I guess, like people going through that?
Well, you know, that's a process. We're all, you know, all of us go through a period of being closeted, some for many years, some for a few months, some for a few days. But the reality is that I say to people who are in that predicament, regardless of your age, because, you know, people are coming out there at 70 years old and 75 years old. People are, you know, take the courage. No matter how long it takes you to come out, it's still a courageous act in an often hostile environment. You know, there's still communities that are very hostile. There's still families that are very hostile. And what I would say is take care of yourself, protect yourself, make certain that you are in a good space to quietly, you know, to build the foundation so that you can come out and enjoy the process of coming out. But be careful. You know, the world, the issues you're concerned about are going to be there when you come out, regardless how long it takes to come out. And so I always tell people to take care of yourself. You know, don't put yourself in danger, and seek out those people very discreetly on the social media who you can dialogue with and at least get some support from.
Got it. And I know you've already touched on this a little bit, but how do you see LGBTQ rights in the context of the upcoming presidential election?
Well, we have two candidates, Biden and Harris, Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, who are been pro-LGBTQ almost their entire political lives. There's no question of, you know, it was Vice President Biden who pushed reluctant President Obama into coming out for same-sex marriage and LGBTQ rights in a stronger way. And I have no doubt that he will continue to do so. I'm part of the campaign, and there are many policy changes and many directives that the Biden-Harris administration will be putting into place if and when they win in November 3rd. As far as the other candidate, the other candidate is not pro-LGBTQ. He's made a passion of attacking transgendered men and women, especially those in the military. He does not allow he's trying to get rid of our voices in the census. You know, if you're not same-sex marriage, you're not going to be counted. You can't designate yourself as being LGBTQ in the census. And it's important to know how many people are out there. We want to know how many, everyone is out there. And, you know, even in COVID-19, only the state of California is counting LGBTQ people who become test positive for COVID-19 or who become sick with COVID-19. And the reason why I mention these things, the Democratic ticket wants to make certain that our voices are heard and that we are counted as Americans and we're counted as human beings. And that's key to doing policy changes. You need to know how many people are being impacted by policy. If you don't have the numbers, you're not going to be able to create the best policy for the community.
Understood. And I guess just transitioning, I know that you're the founder and president of the Center for Black Equity, which specifically focuses on Black LGBTQ individuals. And I guess a common question that comes up when they hear about, or some people hear about an organization like this is, why do the Black people in the LGBTQ community face unique challenges compared to the general LGBTQ community?
Well, first of all, we live in a racist society, and we have the institutions of our society are basically built on the premise of white supremacy and racism. And that's no secret. And that's why we're having Black Lives Movement issues. And that's why people of all colors and of all generations are coming together to stand up for changes in our racist institutions. And racism, if it extends in the regular society, it extends in the LGBTQ space as well. And the fact of the matter is that many of the issues for Black LGBTQ people or LGBTQ people of color in general are different because we mostly live in our own communities. We don't live in the gay part of town. We don't live in Boys Town, Chicago, or the neighborhood in Philadelphia, or DuPont Circle. We don't live, we can't afford to live there. So we're still living in Black communities. And so while we are LGBTQ, but we're also Black, and so we're in two communities. And unfortunately, sometimes we're not appreciated in either one. There's still rampant homophobia in the Black community. There's still racism in the white LGBT community. So we have to create our own safe spaces. And that's for the CBE, that's what we foster. We have 47 US affiliates and 8 affiliates abroad. And our affiliates do mostly Black LGBTQ prides. And the reason why we do those is to create safe spaces, not just for Black folks. Anyone's welcome to our pride events. I get calls for DC Black Pride, which is with the CBE, we run that one. I get calls every spring and saying that I'm white, I'm Latino, can I come to DC Black Pride? I said, of course you can. We can't create a space for just for us and not invite and not have other people participate. It's a Black cultural experience. We're not ashamed to be Black. We're not ashamed to be LGBTQ, and we're able to create this wonderful space that anyone can enjoy, but it provides safety for tens of thousands of Black LGBTQ people so that they can be safe and feel that they have value and that their voices are being heard.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, so I know you touched upon the fact that like LGBTQ and racism intersect. And I guess like on the broad topic of intersectionality, how does the fight for LGBTQ rights intersect with the movements of other social identities?
Oh, of course. We do, the CBE, we do trainings once a year for our 47 affiliates, and we fly them in. And we spend most times talking about intersectionality. We talk about the intersectionality of the reproductive rights community. How we need to stand with them is that, human rights are human rights, and that, women should have the choices over their body. And whether my feeling on, for example, abortion is irrelevant because I can't have one. And so I don't have a say. All I have a say is if I were able to have one, I would say, yes, I want one, or yes, I don't want one. But since I don't have that opportunity, it's not for me to say how other women, or do with their bodies or the choices they make. So, it's about choices and freedom of choices and standing with others. We had talk about union issues, the rights of union people, the rights of workers, a minimum wage, $15 minimum wage, which is considered a living wage, but it really isn't if you live in places like in DC or New York or Philadelphia, places I've lived in. $15 an hour is not a lot of money, but we need to stand with those people who are fighting for fair, equal justice and employment. We need to, we had opportunities to talk to people working in the substance use field and environment. Those are important because we all benefit, we all have to breathe the air. We all drink water. We all have to, live in a place where we want safe water, not like Flint, or we want a safe environment. And unfortunately, in most minority communities, the environment, there's lots of toxic waste. The water's often poor. The air is often polluted. And so that's important to us. And we need to work with people to clean our air and clean our water, because we're all breathing the same air and drinking the same water, and it should be clean. And so we need to work on issues of fairness, immigration. Many of our affiliates are not, they're native born. Almost all the leadership is native born. and many of the people who attend our events are native born. However, we have immigrants who are people of color. We have immigrants who are Black from the Caribbean and Africa and other parts of the world. We have other kinds of immigrants from Asia and from Latin America. We need to stand together with those communities, because if you can discriminate against that community, you can discriminate against our community. We're trying to end discrimination. Even though we focus on Black folks, we stand with many, many different communities, and we're parts of many coalitions to do the right thing for everyone. We want equal justice, not for me. I want equal justice for you. I want equal justice for everyone, because and if you think about it, it's actually really easy to do. It's actually, to treat people fairly is really very easy. You just do it. You just be decent to people. You respect people. You treat people the way you want to be treated. It's called the golden rule in Christianity. But it's actually a very simple thing. It's no skin off my nose that you are a different race than mine, and your food is different than mine, and your customs are different than mine. I don't care. How does that impact me? It doesn't. So the fact of the matter is, I want you to have the same rights that I enjoy, and because you're a human being, not because you're special, not because you are not from this country or are born here, but because you're human and you have a right to exist. And if we treat people the way we want to be treated, we would eliminate a lot of discrimination, a lot of hatred.
Yeah, those are great words. And I guess just as a final closing statement, do you have any, I guess, like final words that would impel Gen Z to act, whether on behalf of LGBT rights or just in general?
You know, I would tell Gen Z to continue doing what you're doing, continue to make a difference, to continue to be a voice of reason, continue to remind us of our sacred duties of taking care of the earth and taking care of the people who reside in the earth, and to take care of our resources. And that's what Gen Z is doing. My one final thought is that when we had our LGBT caucus, I met a young man named Sam Dotson, who was the vice chair of the High School Democrats of America. And someone forwarded his information to me, and I asked him to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And I asked him to talk about the importance of younger people voting in this election. And he blew us away. He was so articulate. And I was like, who is this guy? This guy is 35 years old, pretending he's 18. But the fact of the matter is, you are articulate. Use your voice for good. Use your voice to stand with other people and continue to lead, because the fact of the matter is, my generation, we tried to do the best we can, I like to believe, but we didn't succeed. We've left a lot of things left undone. And your generation is going to be the generation that changed this country and change it permanently to make it the ideal of what we're supposed to be, respecting human beings and respecting human rights. And your generation is going to do it. And so my job is to support your generation and to give you the tools for you to do things that we couldn't do.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Fowlkes, for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. Stay safe. Yep. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see everybody next time on Inside Politics. Hi, everyone. This is Christina. Thank you so much for watching Inside Politics, and please feel free to check out the rest of the interviews on my channel. See you next time.